Nau mai, haere mai, piki mai, ka ki mai, kia ora e tiwi, and welcome to 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We do 30 minutes with one guest and no cut, so what we record is what you get. Graci Kim is the New Zealand diplomat who became a New York Times best-selling author of children's fantasy books. Her latest creation, Dreamslinger, is already on the list of best books at the likes of Barnes & Noble and Amazon. But the Korean New Zealander has had her share of struggles. She once wrestled with using a European name, fearing her Korean name might be a barrier to success as an author. And she's just cancelled a US book tour of schools, as some feared it might be viewed as a diversity initiative in Trump's America. Her books feature fantastical creatures and draw on Korean culture and mythology. How does she keep the magic alive in these strange times? Let's start the clock. 30 minutes with Graci Kim. Graci Kim, welcome to 30.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Guyon.
You described Dreamslinger as if X-Men met Pokemon and was set in a Korean magic school. What's it like to release this magic into the world and know that young minds are weaving it into their own dreams?
Oh, I don't know if there is really a way to describe the feeling of what it's like when you see a young reader say that they've read a book and it has changed them or that they've enjoyed it. I don't think there's a way to describe that feeling except to say that I did not have that. A lot of books that I would have loved to have read didn't exist when I was a kid. So I guess when kids can enjoy the books that I write, it's honestly, it's music to my ears. It's music to a writer's ears.
Just to give people a sense of it, in Dreamslinger you've got 14-year-old Aria. She lives in this rest haven home for dreamslingers, a sort of safe haven for children born with a genetic mutation that transports them to a magic realm while they sleep. So this is the magic school genre that will resonate with Harry Potter fans, right?
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So Aria, the main character, she has this genetic mutation, like you say, that allows her to travel physically into her dreams. And this place is it's amazing. It's full of magic, can also be deadly. And what she does is she enters the annual Dreamslinger trials, and she wants to go in as a spy to tear the organization down from the inside because they're the ones who killed her mother. So she wants to avenge her. But in doing so, she learns a whole lot about herself that than she could have ever imagined.
Yeah, this is a story where you've got a group of kids whose emotions are so strong that they sort of unleash physical powers. Where did you get the inspiration for this?
That specific part is really interesting. So I have a daughter. She's just turned 5 and she started school this year. I remember when she became a toddler, she just had these big emotions. You know, she was this very deep, and still is this very deep feeling sensitive kid. And I was like, wow, how do I help her regulate these big emotions? Because emotions in itself, they're not bad. You're just helping them regulate them, right? And I was like, imagine if a subsection of humanity was born with such strong emotions that they could actually manifest as powers like ice or fire or what have you. How would they be treated by society? Like, would they be accepted? Would they be in danger? Would they have to be institutionalized? That was one of the inspirational sparks, I guess, for this world.
And those themes, and you touch on some of them, I read Publishers Weekly saying that this story weaves in serious emotional themes of discrimination, segregation and acceptance through an adventure story. Were they the themes that you were aiming for?
Do you know what? When I write, my number one goal, and probably my only goal at the start, is to just write a fun story. Because I think reading should be fun. It shouldn't be a chore. And so for me, there wasn't really a big idea of themes per se.
That's more subconscious though, isn't it? You've got to get your story, but...
Absolutely. But I think in hindsight and revisions, what I realized, what I was trying to say partially, was that I'd love for people to know that being an exception allows you to become exceptional. There's just a chance. So what's really important is your choice in the matter. One of the things I sometimes talk about is how my parents, when I was younger, in their arguments, I would try to butt in and try to solve their problems by understanding who was right and who was wrong. And what I quickly found is that often there is no right and wrong. You know, people have their own baggage and they're coming at it with their own lens. And that in this kind of, especially now, a world of competing absolutes, what's really important is that we find our own due north and we forge our own path. And that comes down to personal choice, how we choose to behave, how we choose to act, how we choose to think. And so I think in hindsight, although it wasn't my initial conscious decision, it comes through the books.
Yeah, and I was interested in that because when they talk about these themes of discrimination, segregation, acceptance, it seemed to hit the real world a little bit when you announced on Facebook a month or so ago that you were going to cancel your US book tour of schools, in part because of the political climate in the US. Tell me what happened there.
Yeah. Look, so usually when a book comes out, you do a tour, you go, and for a middle grade author, so that's books around 8 to 14, for 8 to 14-year-olds, you visit schools because that's where they are, you talk about them, you get them excited about reading. And it was planned, it was supposed to be about a 2-week tour across the country in the US. And I got some messages from teachers who were very, very apologetic, saying, look, our kids love your books. We really want you here, but you are of Korean heritage. You've got a Korean name. You write about things that are inspired by Korean culture and Korean mythology. And that means your visit can be perceived as a diversity and inclusion initiative. And that could potentially incite scrutiny from their schools or boards or authorities. And therefore they were unable to host me. And, it was so disappointing because that's the part I love. You write a book and you want to share it with readers. But I have to say, my more, overriding emotion was just one of real sadness, because I think the teachers and librarians who are having to work under these guidelines at the moment, I can only imagine how difficult things are for them navigating this. And of course, for the kids who just want to read a good book. Yeah.
So, because this is a real concern, isn't it? I was just reading about Julianne Moore's children's book, Freckle Face Strawberry, right?
I shouldn't laugh, but yeah.
Sounds innocuous enough. Freckle Face Strawberry, bit of a tongue twister, about a girl who learns to stop hating her freckles. Now, that book was temporarily removed from from schools that support military families in the US because it was reviewed. You know about this story, right? Yeah, because it was as part of this backlash against what the Americans call DEI, or Diversity, Equity and Inclusion Initiative. So this is a real concern, isn't it?
It is a real concern. I mean, the point about that book, the reason it was the reason it was banned was because the idea of having freckles being celebrated as a difference was not a message that, wanted to be supported. And I've heard similar things with books like, what was the other one? The Diary of Anne Frank. And I don't know what the reasoning behind that one was, but it's a shocking and real thing. I mean, book banning is a very real thing. And it may only be apparent to the communities that are really involved in promoting books, but it is real.
Just a couple of things commercially and emotionally.
Yeah.
Emotionally, how did it make you feel?
It's a complicated. I think there's two parts of it, the two ways I look at it. One is, yes, it's disappointing and it brings back, a little bit of trauma and remembrance of how difficult it was growing up, somehow feeling like I was not Kiwi enough, or even though we're talking about a different country, the feelings of being other and not being good enough, not being worthy, it did bring back those emotions. But I think what I like to think, is that I have my Korean resilience and my Korean perseverance, and I have my Kiwi optimism and my Kiwi can-do attitude. And so the way I see it is, in the bigger situation, the bigger picture, this is but a blip. So I just choose not to let this affect me, because I'm not going to stop writing. I'm still going to write, and I'm still going to reach my readers.
And I guess, too, it's a testament to the power of books, right?
Oh.
They move people, they can build empathy, they can build understanding. So, it's a testament to that power in a way, that this book banning idea.
Absolutely. Something really interesting happened recently where I shared some comments online about how I think adults should read middle grade books. And I thought it was this very innocuous message that we should be spreading the joy of books, even children's books with adults as well, because we can all take something from books. And I got so much backlash.
Did you? What?
I received some death threats. It was quite
death threats for recommending that people read YA.
Yes, but I thought about this, and I think it is that I hit a nerve, and I wonder if we have gotten to a point where we're so sensitive and possibly insecure about what we read, how much we read, perhaps not reading enough, or our general ability to appreciate the power of books, that even the mere suggestion that adults could also enjoy children's books because there's a child within all of us that never grows old, that never goes away, that was almost seen as an attack, and it brought the defensiveness out. And in some ways, I thought that wasn't a bad thing if we can encourage more people to read books.
Yeah, I won't spend too much time on Trump, but
Yeah.
You must have a circle of other writers who are facing these issues. I mean, are people talking to you about their concerns in this respect, especially in the US, because it's a big market for you. You've got Disney's your publisher over there. I mean, it must be an important market for you.
It's my largest market. I would love to write books for Kiwi kids, and I do, but I can't make a living out of that because we are such a small country, yeah. So I do rely heavily on the US, and yes, I do have colleagues and friends who are definitely feeling it on the ground. There is no denying the impact, for example, on school visits for writers of colour, but also writers who are of LGBT communities. Yeah, it is real.
And they're worried, they're concerned that they will face a backlash.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Well, even just, in the middle grade area, school visits are our bread and butter because that's the way, children shouldn't be on social media, right? So the way to reach them are through teachers and librarians and parents and what we call gatekeepers. And that has become very difficult for a lot of writers because of the perceived risks.
Let's go back in your story as a writer and your journey to become a writer.
Yeah.
I read that you wrote your first book at you wrote your first story, not your first book. You wrote your first story at 11?
Yeah, that's right. It was called The Multicolored Club, and it was a mashup of Spice Girls, who I was heavily obsessed with at the time, and the Babysitters Club, who I was also obsessed with at the time.
Now, I know a bit about the Babysitters Club because I read it from, I've got an 11-year-old, and I read it to her for many, many months when she was, I don't know, maybe 6 till 9, something like that. So was that was an early inspiration for you, was it?
Absolutely. And I think one of the reasons I loved it was because there was a character called Claudia, and she was Japanese American, and she was cool. She was like into art, and she
Claudia Kishi, wasn't it?
That's it. You got it.
Yeah.
And she used to wear her dad's like paint splattered shirts, and so I obviously got my dad's shirts and splotted paint on them to wear them to school.
She was cool, wasn't she?
She was very cool, yeah. And it was the first time I had seen a kid like me, even though she was Japanese American and I was Korean Kiwi, that I saw someone who looked a bit like me being a character in a book, and my brain just went dung dung.
Isn't it interesting? Because one of the characters is a type 1 diabetic, and I'm a type 1 diabetic, and I was reading this in my late 40s or whatever it was.
Yeah.
But to see, it really resonates when you see someone like you in a book, doesn't it?
It makes all the difference, I think. I grew up not knowing. I'll tell you a story. At primary school, I had to write this writing project about my family, and I was so proud of it. I handed it in, and my teacher said, "Oh, this is a pretty good piece of writing, but I want to ask, why did you describe your family as being blonde and blue-eyed?" And I was very confused by the question. And she was like, "Because you do realize you are Korean. You're allowed to write your family as they are as Koreans." And I was like, "No, I'm not. Show me one book where the main character looked like me, and then I'll believe you." And she said, "If it doesn't exist yet, it just means someone hasn't done it yet." And I think what I realized is when you don't see yourself on the page, you internalize over time this idea that you're invisible and that you don't matter and that you don't have a voice. You're not worthy. And not only teaches you that, but it teaches everybody else that. And it's actually one of the reasons I started to write, because I wanted to be part of the change. I wanted for my daughter to be able to see herself on the page and know that she can be the hero of her own story, but also because everybody else deserves to experience the magic of walking in someone else's shoes. Did that answer your question? I can't remember what your question was about.
I can't remember what my question was either. I was fascinated in your answer. It brings us back to your upbringing as a child too. You obviously you're born in South Korea and
I was.
came to New Zealand, I think, when you were maybe 3 years old, something
Yes.
around there. What sort of experience was that in primary school, high school? I mean, did you face racist bullying and those types of issues as a kid in New Zealand?
Unfortunately, yes. I have to preface that by saying overall, I had a very idyllic, peaceful, very typical Kiwi upbringing. But I would be lying if I said there weren't moments where I was made to feel like I wasn't Kiwi enough. Kids used to spit in my lunch and throw stones at me. I would see people, there was this one time where people would be egging my dad and using terrible slurs, telling him to go back to his own country, or people giving my mum the finger and, calling her a stupid Asian or what have you. There was always reminders of that. But, interestingly, I think that's one of the reasons why I initially became a diplomat before I became a writer, because I think
this is the irony, isn't it? You get pushed back and then you end up representing New Zealand as a diplomat.
I think that was it. I think I had...
It's a motivation for you to do that.
I felt I had something to prove. Like, I have a value to provide to you, New Zealand. I do belong here, New Zealand. I'm a Kiwi kid, New Zealand. I really felt, I guess, this desire to show my worth. And, it's kind of sad to reflect on maybe that being one of the motivations, but it was true. And I loved it. It was a wonderful job, seeing the world and representing your country.
Well, let's talk a little bit about that, because I think you spent, 10 years at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade?
Yeah.
You posted Taipei, Beijing. So you were working in Beijing on what? Trade and economics, those sorts of areas?
That was exactly it, trade and economic issues. It was a fantastic time, yeah.
And you had a few sort of sliding doors moments from what I could work out over there. There was the experience where you realised that you were potentially losing your sight.
Oh,
tell me about that.
Yeah, okay. So I was based at the New Zealand Embassy in Beijing, living the life, having a wonderful time. And I went to work one day and I couldn't read my screen. My monitor was blurry. And I wear contact lenses, so I just presumed I needed a new prescription. But when I went to the optometrist, she was very flustered and she said, I need a medevac you to a eye hospital, stat. And so I still stayed calm. They took me to the eye hospital and then the specialist checked my eyes. And finally, she sat me down and the ophthalmologist said, look, Graci, I don't know how to tell you this, but if you don't get emergency surgery within the next 24 to 72 hours, you will be blind. And I mean, that's...
Wow, that's pretty confronting,
isn't it? It's a bit of news. So I had the surgery the very next morning, but because they didn't know how much of my sight would recover eventually, they had to cover both my eyes. And so for a very long time, I was completely sightless. I couldn't even go to the bathroom by myself without my parents' help, who had flown into China from New Zealand to help me during this time. So it was a very dark time for me.
And did that accentuate your other senses? I'm just wondering, I'm just trying to connect it back to your writing, because you lose your sight, your other senses, because this is a couple of months, right? So did it accentuate your other senses of...
You know what's really funny? My dad opened a can of Sprite and left it in a glass next to the hospital bed on the bedside table and then left the room. So I'm in the hospital, and as far as I'm aware, I can't see, but as I am aware, there is no one else in the room but me and this glass of Sprite. And the thing about your senses is they get really heightened. So because I couldn't see, my hearing was excellent. And it was just bubbling and fizzing away.
Off.
And I lost it. I honestly don't know who saw me or heard me, but I just turned to it and I was like, hey, just be quiet. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Do you think that
lost my marbles?
Do you think that has influenced your writing at all?
Perhaps. Yeah. During that time, I did think a lot about old memories. And one of the memories that came up was this writing assignment that I had done in primary school. And lots of other stories from childhood that my parents and my harmoni, which is my nana, told us growing up. And that was, I guess, all of these different thoughts came together with this realization that I wanted to be part of the change of writing these stories and penning these books. So yeah, I think that definitely had an impact.
And then coming back to New Zealand, I think around 2021, you have the trilogy comes out. It was the Last Fallen Star, I think, was the first book, wasn't it? But this is the Gifted Clans trilogy. Which became a New York Times bestseller. So that's when things really take off for you, right?
Yes. And, it seems like it was this overnight thing. And
reading about it, but not for you, right?
Almost never is. It came out, and actually one of the biggest challenges was that I had this, again, big book tour planned in the US. So Rick Riordan, who's the author of the Percy Jackson series, a really extremely beloved children's series.
Yeah, he sold like 30 million books.
Oh, yeah, easy.
He's big, yeah.
Easy. And we were supposed to tour together on a bus and travel around the US, but, COVID happened. Yeah. And so my tour was cancelled, and I did everything virtually when virtual events and things were the norm back then. So, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but it was a real journey. And in fact, during that time, what I did flex my muscles in was other creative ways to get in front of my readers. I think that's one of the hardest parts. I always thought becoming a writer, you have this montage of a writer in the cabin in the woods with a really beautiful old typewriter, and you just type, and it's done.
Some Remington that does pushing away on.
Maybe like a montage of like coffee cups stacking up, but it's done, right? Yeah. But that is not how it is. I think as a writer today, so much of our job is not about writing the book at all. That's just like the very start. It's about marketing.
Yeah, it is, and you've got an impressive marketing and business sort of strategy. I mean, there's a book trailer on YouTube that I watched. The character we talked about earlier, Aria in Dreamslinger, she sings this lullaby in the book, and then you got someone to sing the song, and then you've got the Dreamslingers League that the kids can join and stuff. So, do you like that hustle, the business marketing side of it? Because you seem pretty adept at it.
That's very kind of you to say. I don't feel adept at it, but I find it quite fun. So it's interesting because I find social media quite difficult. Having to be present all the time and be available all the time, I find quite draining. I'm quite a naturally introverted person, and so I find that quite hard. But I also find the ability to join dots and connect people together, like the lullaby being done by this awesome musician, Bridges, who happens to also be connected through family and was our wedding singer, and all of these different ways that you can get excited about a book. I think if you are genuinely excited, I think that hopefully translates to the reader as well. So I find it fun.
Yeah. So you've got your name on all these books, but it nearly wasn't your name, was it?
No.
You were considering using, you did start using a pen name, a European name. Tell me that story.
So when I first started writing, I was told that by many sources, even booksellers who have found the experience of readers coming in saying that they don't want to read quote unquote Asian books or Asian writers. And they said, for your sake, you should adopt a pen name, one that doesn't immediately show your Korean heritage. And so I came up with a really cool one, Gold Heart. Yep. Gold because Kim means gold, and Heart because I use a double-barreled last name, and Cribbins, my married name, is the man who stole my heart. So I thought Gold Heart was kind of cool. And I was quite happy about it. And then one day I overheard my dad talking to his friend, and his friend, it was a photo of me being shortlisted for a writing prize. And Dad's friend said, "Oh, that's odd. Why does it say Graci Goldheart? Who's that? Your daughter is Graci Kim." And my dad went really quiet, and he then said, "Oh, well, it's because Korean names just aren't as respected. But that's okay because my daughter, she knows what she's doing and I trust her." And it was in this moment that I had this realization that I wasn't just concealing my name, I was concealing his too. And it just opened up this kind of research, actually, of the history of names and the meaning of names. So during the Japanese occupation of Korea, Koreans weren't allowed to have their names. Their language was taken away from them. And they had to fight to regain their ability to use their own language and use their own names. And then here I was, sorry, it's not marketable enough, so I'm not going to use it. I felt such shame about that. And I also thought about who else carries this name. So my dad, right? My dad, he's like an angel on earth. He used to run a restaurant for many years, and people would come in and sometimes people would steal food from him, and he would then treat them with more food, because his idea was that how badly would they need this if they're stealing food? Sometimes you just need a reminder that someone cares in the world. He's this kind of man. And I was concealing his name, and I thought, enough. You know, come what may.
Because you had gone down the track of this, right? Like
Yes.
you'd set up a website, I think, social media accounts. You had, you know, and obviously, had you published under that name?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah. Wow. So, but you were well down that path.
Oh yes, yeah. Websites, social media handles. I mean, everything. I mean, you know, everything that could have a name on it, bar a published book, it had it on there. Yeah.
So was it that in that moment you decided, no, I'm going to return to Kim as a writer? At the moment that you overheard your father talking with his friend?
It really was. It really was. I mean, in and around that, my husband and I, as part of our honeymoon, also went to Korea. So my husband also adopted Kim as part of his legal name. And he wanted to visit the birthplace of our very specific clan of Kims. So there's like 20 million Kims in the world. Yeah, there's a lot of Kims.
It's about 20% of Korea.
Yeah, 20% of Korea.
Yeah.
But there are different clans of Kims. And so our clan, the Gyeongju Kims, my husband Neil, he wanted to visit. So we went and visited, and it kind of just morphed into this exploration of my history. I spoke about my dad, but my granddad, so my dad's dad, very poor village that he grew up in, not enough food. And it was when leprosy was a real thing, and people thought it was like extremely contagious and you just stayed away from people with leprosy. But my granddad would bring these people in, and he would bathe them and feed them and put new clothes on their back. I mean, this journey just made me realize
how much resonance there is in a name. And was it about you reclaiming your name to a degree too? Because I wonder how much of your reaction to initially push that name aside was tied up with the memories of being racially abused as a kid. I mean, was that part of it?
Absolutely, absolutely. I always thought that, you know, it's like a new outfit. Maybe if you put a new outfit on, you can just pretend the things didn't happen. But that's not the way it works, really. You have to process these things and then reclaim, I love that word, and reclaim the things that were hurtful and use it in beautiful new ways. And I think I do that every day in my writing. I feel like my act of writing is my act of joy. It's my act of revolution. It's my act of rebellion. And I love it.
I wonder how your dad feels now about seeing your name on all those books.
And his name, he's a man of few words, but of many tears, and many tears have been shed.
In a world where AI can write stories and social media and screen time compete for our children's attention, how important are books and storytelling, do you think?
This is a very difficult one. I think there is such competition for our time, even as adults. So for children whose brains are still forming and solidifying, it is additionally hard to ignore the allure of algorithms and things designed to grab their attention. Books require a little bit of work. You know, once you get in there, you can't stop, especially if it's a good read. But there is an initial investment. And especially through COVID, there have been documented drops in literacy rates and reading for pleasure for children and for adults, although some different genres did bloom. And I think, you know, the truth cannot be denied, but I think one of the best ways that we can maybe counter that, because books are not going away, nor should they go away. There is such a beautiful... Oh, I believe it wholeheartedly. There is such a magic, transformative power of books that cannot be replaced. Doesn't mean that other mediums cannot exist, but books in itself will not go away. But I think what we do need to do is model that behavior, model reading for pleasure. So as adults, especially if we're parents, we need to be reading. We need to be carrying a book if we're going out instead of just flicking through our phones in those spare moments. Why not read a book?
Because I was going to ask you, you're asking for a friend, of course, but for parents who sometimes struggle their kids to put the screens away and read, what are your thoughts? Is it about that? Is it about showing them that you're doing?
I think that's part of it, especially when they're slightly younger, although, you know, maybe later on it works against you. You want to be kind of different from your parents and don't want to be doing what they're doing, possibly. But I think also looking at different mediums. It doesn't matter what type of books. If it's a graphic novel, that's still a book. You know, I think we have this approach that maybe if there's too many pictures, it's not really
Yeah,
a
it doesn't have to be
book.
War and Peace, does it?
Absolutely. If they want to read romance, if they want to read fantasy, it doesn't matter. It's the joy of reading and the joy and the magic of walking in someone else's shoes through a book. I think that's where the empathy that you mentioned comes in. That's where the transportative nature comes in. You learn from books. You know, they're not just entertainment, although that is, I think, the number one thing about books. They're fun, but they also teach us. They allow us to experience a life in a world without having us needing to live it in real life.
So what's next for you? This Dreamslinger is another trilogy, is it?
Probably a duology at this point, but we'll wait and see. Yeah.
And Disney's your publisher, and they optioned your initial book, didn't they? The Fallen Star, or at least that trilogy. Is there a movement on that?
No movement. The interesting thing I've heard. So the publishing industry is known to be no until you get one final yes. In the show business or on the screen industry, I've heard it's the absolute opposite. Oh, yes, it's happening, yes, until it's one final no. So we'll wait and see. If one of my books in the future was adapted to screen, that would be incredible, because that's like a whole different creative pursuit where you get to share your work with somebody else to bring it to life in that way. But again, if it doesn't work, that's okay.
You're quite happy being a writer.
I am.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming in. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you. It's been awesome.
That's Graci Kim, 30 Minutes with Graci Kim. And this is 30 with me, Guyon Espiner. We'll catch you next time. Ngā mihi nui.